day, about 2 years ago, I headed into my job as the director of marketing at American Apparel. I stopped at a private club in Los Angeles. I worked out, I had breakfast, I read the news. I headed into my office. It's at the factory there in the warehouse district in a 200-year-old building. I get into my desk. The first thing I do is I start signing advertising insertion orders, right? These are ads that are going to run all over the world. We're opening a new store, so I write a store press release. And then I start flipping through fashion magazines from the library to see where our brand has been placed. And you could argue that, with the exception of some of the technology that I'm using, my routine on this day is not altogether different than the marketers that I aspire to be like. You have Edward Bernays, you have David Ogilvy, maybe you have Don Draper, right? But on that day, I read an article that sort of stopped me cold. The routine it's my normal routine, but it caught my attention. Here's the headline. It says, "Growth Hacker is the new VP of marketing." Now, this caught my attention for a couple reasons. One, I'm a VP of marketing. I like my job. And here's someone telling me that my job is about to be replaced with something that I've never heard of. I have no idea what a growth hacker is. So I decide that I'm gonna read into this. And so I go through the article and I look at the companies that claim that growth hacking was integral to their success. So you have Facebook, Airbnb, Hotmail, Mailbox, Zynga, Groupon, Dropbox, Twitter. These are billion-dollar companies that were built, right in front of us in the last 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years. Let's put it there. And you could argue that they did this doing none of the things that I prided myself of being good at. There's no press releases, there's not PR firms, there's not Madison Avenue, there's not billboards in Times Square. In fact, they really did no traditional marketing at all. And so if you're a traditional marketer, this is a wake-up call, right? Here are billion-dollar brands who became billion-dollar brands not doing the things that we do every day, not doing what we do in our routine. And so I sit down and I decide I'm going to study this. I'm going to figure out what's going on here. And it turns out, of course, it wasn't luck that made these companies a success. They didn't just throw up a landing page and then get 1 billion users. It was growth hacking. And if I had to define this idea as best I could, I would say that a growth hacker is someone who throws out traditional marketing and they replace it with what's testable, trackable, and scalable. And while the rest of us chase the sort of vague notions that we think about when we think about marketing with branding and mindshare, growth hackers pursue growth, right? They pursue sustainable growth. And they grow companies typically from nothing to something. And so here are the sort of the 4 phases of growth hacking that I thought I would go through with you guys. As part of this wake-up call for me. It begins with product market fit. Growth is hacked in some way. Virality is an important component. And then finally, the loop is closed with this idea of retention and optimization. So product market fit, right? What's the single worst marketing decision that you can make? And I think we've all been there. It's that you start with a crappy product. But as marketers, this is what we do day in and day out. Our job starts when the product is finished. But a growth hacker says, why? Why can't the product be improved? Why does it have to start? Why does it have to start so late in the process? Why are we getting handed this final product when market feedback would incorporate into the product the elements that make it successful? And so when marketers stop thinking of their job as to simply work on what's already been done, but to answer these questions: who is the product for? Why would they use it? Why do I use it? Marketing is baked into the product. So I love this quote from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator. He says, "Make stuff people want. That's the best marketing decision that you can make." And I think if you look at a company like Instagram, you see this very clearly, right? Instagram launched as a Foursquare competitor called Bourbon. It was a geolocation service. And it had a feature that allowed people to upload photos and put filters on them. It got a little bit of traction, but nothing truly profound. And so they decide they're going to zoom in on this single feature. They're gonna throw everything that they've done out so far, And they're going to rebrand as Instagram. It launches, I think it does something like 25,000 downloads its first day. And it sells to Facebook a year later for $1 billion. So you could argue that the best marketing decision that Instagram made was changing from Bourbon to Instagram. Everything else was extra. Everything else was window dressing. The product was the marketing. And then I think we've, I think we tend to, I call this Blockbuster Syndrome. We want every launch to be enormous. We want to concentrate it all in a very small period, and we want to bring in millions and millions of users. We want to be a trending topic on Twitter. We want millions of video views. We want to be on the front page of newspapers. But is this really what we need? Or is it better to find the right early adopters cheaply and quickly? And so when you look at a company like Uber, which launched first not worldwide, but in a select number of cities, and they targeted very early on specific users, typically tech male users in cities like San Francisco and New York. And when they said, okay, how are we going to grow this product, they latched on South by Southwest as a place to launch because their target customers from all over the world would be in one city for 1 week during the year. And they gave away millions of dollars worth of Uber rides. They forced people through the product. They taught them how to use it. And then they took that knowledge back to the cities that they are from. Airbnb is another amazing example. They said, okay, we're a tiny startup. We're trying to get people to get comfortable using it. Where do we find our customers? So they created a workaround that allowed people to cross-post their very early Airbnb listings onto Craigslist. So here they are using the dominant platform for apartments to grow their brand. And so I like this idea of hacking the system. And there's this quote from Miha Baldwin, the founder of Graphically. He's saying, because we don't have the budgets, because we don't have the huge marketing departments, we have to look for the tricks and the shortcuts. How do we bring people through the system, force them to use it, get them acclimated to doing so, and then we move on to the next component, which is this idea of virality. Now, virality gets a bad rap because we've all been in those meetings where someone says, hey, can you make this video go viral for me? Or how do we make this product go viral? But of course, it's never going to go viral because it sucks. But it's also never going to go viral because there's not a reason to. It's not built into the product. So when I think about virality, I think about people who build shareability and publicness into their product. So I think about Apple and BlackBerry adding the sent from my iPhone or sent from my BlackBerry to the bottom of each one of their emails. Or Groupon and Living Social's Refer a Friend program, which paid users to bring in new users. And look, virality isn't luck, it's not magic. It's definitely not random either. There's a science behind why people talk about things, and you have to build those into the product. Dropbox is another amazing example. It's Get Free Stuff or Get Free Space program. At one point was driving 33% of their user signups because they paid users in free storage, which cost them next to nothing, to refer their friends. And this is the goal of every growth hacker, right? To build a self-perpetuating marketing machine. So you create an amazing product, you bring in users, and then those users bring in more users. And then the final step, I see growth hacking as sort of being this loop, right? Whatever your current state is, it can be better. But as marketers, we often think our job is just to find leads. Hey, I got you in the New York Times, I got you on CNN, I got you on the front page of TechCrunch. It's not my fault if it didn't bring in a lot of customers. It's not my fault that the ads aren't driving signups. So marketing isn't, from a growth hacking perspective, marketing isn't just about leads. It's about conversion. Retention and optimization is part of your job as a growth hacker. So Dropbox has another amazing program, which I think is really smart. They'll pay you in free storage if you take a tutorial that walks you through the product. Why are they doing this? So you'll be a better user. So they'll see the features that users have trouble figuring out, and they'll pay them to learn. So they'll be better evangelists of the brand. They'll stick to the product better. And by getting them past these hurdles, they have a more engaged user base. The focus, this is from Eric Ries, the author of The Lean Startup, the focus needs to be on improving customer retention. Acquisition is always more sexy, it's always more fun, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which part of the equation you address. And in fact, the retention part is usually easier because the people are already there. Probably one of the best examples I think of this is Twitter's suggested user list, which came about because when Twitter launched, it had all sorts of buzz, it was getting all sorts of attention, but most users were signing up and then immediately leaving. And a growth hacker at Twitter named Josh Ellman saw that there was a difference between the users that stuck and the users that didn't. And that difference was that users who added a series of friends within the first 24 hours were much more likely to stick around. So Josh coded a feature, the suggested users list, which many of you probably remember. And the purpose of that was not to get you to follow more celebrities, but so new users, when they signed up, were more likely to stick. And so here you have a feature inside of a product development or a conversion hack that is actually driving more users to stick with the product rather than bringing new ones in and being fine with the fact that they leave through a hole in the back. And so this is one of my favorite quotes from the samurai swordsman Musashi. He says, "If you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything." So I wrote this book about growth hacking, sort of had this moment where I realized that, hey, there was all this stuff going on, and I wasn't super familiar with it because I usually work with traditional brands. And I didn't think that I would ever actually employ any of these tactics in my own business. But in late 2012, I worked on a book launch for Tim Ferriss. He wrote a book called The 4-Hour Chef. It was his third book. It was published by Amazon. And because it was published by Amazon, we found out at the very last minute, about 6 weeks before launch, that it was going to be banned by every major bookstore in the United States. And this is pretty much the worst thing that can happen to you if you were doing a traditional book launch, because that's where books are sold. So how do we hit the New York Times bestseller list? How do we move copies if all the traditional marketing stuff is out the window? That leaves growth hacking, right? How do we do this? How do we treat this book like a startup that we're creating from nothing? One of the first things we did was a BitTorrent giveaway where we gave away something like 250 pages of the book, videos, photos, all sorts of extra stuff. It ended up getting downloaded, I think, about 3 million times. It drove 250,000 people to the Amazon page. It was the single most effective thing. I've worked on close to a dozen bestsellers. It was the single most effective thing that I've ever seen in the history of book marketing. And it came from giving a sizable portion of the book away. And so it was this proof for me that the traditional marketing, the untrackable, the untested things aren't working anymore, and that we want to experiment and we want to try new things. And so this partner, you can see here are the numbers. It ends up hitting every bestseller list that you can imagine: the New York Times, USA Today, the Wall Street Journal. Here's the bundle that we did. You can see it's got a discount code. We're able to track whether it's working. We're actually getting email addresses for everyone who's downloading the bundle that we can market to later. Ironically, when you do interesting, unusual marketing things, you tend to get a lot of media attention for them anyway. So it ended up getting covered in most major media outlets, which was an extra little bump in sales and was always nice. And so the thinking is, look, if you can growth hack a book, probably one of the least changed or technologically updated industries in the world, the business model is essentially the same as it's been for the last 500 years. You can probably growth hack whatever other businesses we happen to be working in. And so I thought I would close with a quote, or with a saying that's popular in the growth hacking community. Because look, these tactics change. What Airbnb did to hack Craigslist, or how Uber hacked South by Southwest, these might not work for you, and they might not work for those same companies again now, because it's about finding the underexploited, misunderstood opportunities and taking advantage of them. But what growth hacking is a mindset rather than a toolkit. It's a way of thinking about marketing. It's a way of asking yourself, am I doing this because this is what a marketer is supposed to do, or am I doing it because it's going to drive users? And that's what Facebook very early on made the decision not to have a marketing department, but instead to have a growth department. And I know that sounds like a semantic difference, but it's an important one, because a marketing department is supposed to do marketing. And a growth department is supposed to grow the business. And that distinction is an important one. That distinction defines what it is that we are here for, which we are ultimately here to grow businesses. We're not here to throw fancy parties or to go to conferences or to make cool creative advertisements. We're here to grow businesses. And what growth hacking is a mindset that allows you to do that. And I think it's worth considering. Because look, the brands that I talked about earlier, these are billion-dollar brands. These are generational defining brands that were built right in front of us. And as marketers, that has to be a wake-up call, because these people who are not trained in the tactics that we are trained in, who didn't have the background or the resources that a lot of us at companies or agencies take for granted, were forced to reinvent what we do. They were forced to teach themselves or to make it up as they went along. And what they made up and the innovations that they came up with might actually be better than what you and I do on a daily basis. And that's something that I'm thinking about now. It's changing the way that I think about marketing. It's changing the way I treat my clients. And so finally, I thought I'd close. This is something that I learned when I did the book. I just created this little so on my first book, which did really well, I found that when I did my second book, I had no way to reach the customers who just bought that book, which is just a thing that all authors have taken for granted. In the last 200 years, they've been publishing books with traditional publishers. So I created this little thing. Look, if you send me an email at this address, I'll give you the transcripts that I made with all the growth hackers that I interviewed for the book. I'll give you a chapter for my first book. And then I've partnered with Growth Hacker TV. They'll give you a coupon code that allows you to watch all these videos with some of the best growth hackers in the world. And it turns out from the readers of the book, I think it's got something like a 10 or a 15% conversion rate, all of which I was able to market when I came out with the paperback of the book, when I came out with my next book. So it's these little tricks, these little things that are designed to acquire and retain users rather than doing what marketing is supposed to be, that I think I wanted to leave you all with. And that's it for me. So thank you.